Hi, I'm Chris, horror filmmaker and fanatic, here to explain how scary movies are. Today I'm going over Jordan Peele's Nope, newly released in 2022. At a California horse ranch, caretakers OJ and Emerald Haywood encounter a mysterious force in the clouds that affects human and animal behavior. I on purpose left the synopsis cryptic because that is how this film was initially marketed, and I think that is part of its strength, is going into the film without knowing too much about it and understanding that it's a mystery. But moving on to the budget, this movie has a whopping budget of $68 million, by far the most for a Jordan Peele film. And of course, since it just came out, we don't have any box office numbers yet, except that in the US and Canada, it is slated to make about $50 million in its opening weekend, so not bad at all. Currently has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 81% and an audience score of 78%. Today I'm going to break down what makes Nope scary in 4 key categories that goes over all the different ways that someone can get scared while watching this film. And as always, if you don't want spoilers for this film, I highly suggest skipping to this time code where I give an overview and my recommendation to the film without giving away spoilers. With that out of the way, buckle up and get ready to soar into the clouds to find out how scary is Nope. First category, the thrills, the intense, heart-pounding excitement in any horror film. Nope is in the middle with its thrills. The reason I break it down into the middle is because, on one hand, the thrills themselves are very huge, very spectacle-driven, massive, big, blockbustery moments, but then on the other hand, this film does take its time building up to those moments, and early on is more something akin to Jaws, where we don't see the monster or the creature, and instead, the events are usually in the aftermath, or we just see a little hint of it in the distance. And of course, since we're talking about spoilers, when the UFO does show up, it is big. There is genuine thrills and lots of really cool, sweeping, epic shots of people running from the UFO and big moments where they're looking up and they're so tiny in this wide shot, and then you just have this looming large spaceship just coming right over them. Everything in the finale where they're trying to capture this UFO and then that TMZ reporter shows up and ruins the whole plan and everyone's running around and the UFO's picking up certain things, and all of that is very exciting. There's all kinds of fun thrills there. But like I said before, I do think that the film takes its time to build up to those thrills, so I can't really put this film super high up in the thrills because there isn't thrills constantly throughout the film. But by far, that budget of $68 million, I can definitely see that it paid off, because for Jordan Peele's films, this is definitely the grandest scale yet. Next category, grossness, the disgusting, ew stuff that your mom would never want to look at because moms are always scared of that kind of stuff. And Nope is quite tame in the grossness category. Whenever the UFO is arriving and sucking people up and stuff, there's no real violence involved with that. They mostly just kind of suddenly disappear or go soaring into the clouds. Like, there's not blood or guts going everywhere. There is a point in the film when the UFO does drop, like it's trash or whatever, and a lot of it gets dropped on the house, and there is some like blood and guts kind of being dropped there, but it's not really focused in on. It's more just kind of looks like, you know, red stuff, just like paint or whatever. So even though the idea of blood and guts raining from the clouds sounds really gross, in reality, the way that it's presented in the film, kind of tame. However, in the beginning of the film, Keith David's death actually has an element of grossness when it first cuts to his eye and that slit in the eye hole where the coin fell through and that's what killed him. That shot where it cuts to his eyes is definitely kind of gross. Like, ooh, okay, that's what got him, because the film doesn't show you initially what happened to him. You just know that he's messed up and dying, and then it just cuts you his dead body in that eye hole. And just the fact that it's like a little coin slot is creepy. You don't usually see that. And then the only other gross thing in the film is the monkey, Gordy. The entire aftermath of what the monkey did on set. He massacred a bunch of people. You know, there's some blood and guts and stuff a little bit, mainly on like the monkey itself when he goes up to Steven Yeun's younger character. When the monkey comes up to him, you can kind of see like the blood and guts on its mouth and its hands. But again, it's kind of shot in a way where it's not really focusing too much in on that. Other than that, honestly, I think this film was really only rated R because of the language, because in terms of grossness and blood and guts and all the other stuff that you could have gotten for a horror R-rated film, I think this film is really tame in this category. Next up, shock value, the surprising, disturbing content that usually only arrives in messed up horror films. Nope is very tame in this category. There's barely anything in this film that I would say people haven't seen before in a usual kind of movie. The entire aftermath of Gordy the monkey, that is pretty shocking. Just that, oh, a monkey killed several people in front of like a child and an audience. That is pretty shocking, but it is mostly just the aftermath that we see. And then when we we do see the monkey kind of beating on people. We don't really see actually the violence, and also the monkey doesn't really look like it's actually hitting super hard. It kind of just looks like bam, bam, bam. And then sure, I guess Keith David's death in the beginning, the coin slot can be kind of shocking maybe, but you know, that's just so tame that it's like barely even worth mentioning. And then the idea of the UFO is definitely very creepy and mysterious, and the way it sucks people up and eats them, but it's not really shown in a graphic, you know, shocking sort of way. There isn't like innocent, important characters, you know, there's not like a baby that gets soared up into the clouds or whatever. Like, there's nothing really here in this film that I would say really surprises people, or that, like, you know, your grandma would be like, oh my, like, not really, you know. I mean, yeah, the monkey, sure, so that's why I have it, you know, a little bit of shock value, but again, for like an R-rated horror film, very tame. And the final category, the most important one when it comes to fear and horror, atmosphere. That overall tone and the way the film makes you feel inside your gut whenever you're watching it. And for this horror film, I will say that the atmosphere is in the middle, and I'm going to explain why. On the one hand, the UFO itself, whenever it's showing up, whenever characters are, you know, getting all quiet and trying to listen for like, uh-oh, where is it? Is it coming by? That's great. All of that is genuine, cool, creepy atmosphere, and it's just kind of spooky and eerie, where things will go quiet and you're just in the desert and all you hear is a little bit of wind, and then maybe some noises in the distance, some voices, maybe horses whinnying. Every now and then there's also like this weird screech sound. But then when the UFO arrives, there's that low drone really going into the bass, and that's really cool. I mean, the whole theater was like rumbling a couple of times, which was really fun. The UFO just brings this certain presence whenever it arrives, where initially it is like you're constantly just looking up in the clouds like, okay, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And I really appreciate the times where it appears for a quick second, but there's no like loud noise to startle you or anything. It's more like just you were looking for that and now, oh, there it was. Because that's how it would be like in real life, and that's fun. However, the reason why I don't have the atmosphere higher is because the UFO doesn't appear a ton of times in the film. So when those certain moments happen where things do go quiet and you are listening intently, that is only part of the film. There's still plenty of times throughout the film where things are normal and characters are, you know, talking to each other or traveling or whatever, and it's not like the film is constantly holding you in this feeling of tension of like, oh god, anything can happen at any moment. You kind of know when the danger is about to arrive because the film will kind of tell you. Like, everything will get quiet and the character's like, uh-oh, it's coming. And that as well, I actually will say that the UFO itself doesn't really scare me. Like, a lot of the atmosphere in this film, when it is scary, I wouldn't actually say it's all that scary. It's more of mysterious and intense and eerie, where you have this otherworldly giant object soaring around. It seems to have a mind of its own, and the characters are trying to learn about it and trying to capture it on camera, and that's all really cool, and like you're really honed in on like, come on, get the shot, get the shot. And especially when like certain characters like Daniel Kaluuya's character, when he is like refusing to look at the UFO and it's like right behind him and you're like, oh god, come on, and then it flies away. It's like, whoo, okay. But I am not actually that scared of the UFO. It's more of intimidating and kind of intense, but like I'm not afraid to look at it myself. It's not like it's this scary thing and I'm like, oh god, it's gonna do this horrible thing to you, because we don't really see what it does to people. We just know that it kind of eats people and it sucks them up into the sky, and that's it. But yeah, I just wasn't really left with this like terrified feeling of like, oh my god, get the UFO away from me, which other, you know, horror films, that's sort of what they're going for. They're going for, you know, when the killer's on screen and it's ugly looking, you're like, ah, you know. But with this film, there's never really a moment where you will look away. Instead, you're just gonna be like, whoa. So that is the main reason why I will leave the atmosphere of this film right in the middle. And now moving on to the overview of all the categories without spoilers. So for an R-rated horror film, we overall have some pretty tame categories here. Everything with the grossness and shock value, you know, if you're thinking that there's going to be some, you know, violent, whatever, like, whoa, horrifying events, that's not really part of this film. The film is not going for that. So it's no slasher or anything like that. So both of those categories are very tame. You're not going to see anything that's actually going to really horrify you or scar you for life, which I'm sure some of the viewers are like, oh, thank God. And then people like me are like, oh, come on. With thrills, you have a good amount of thrills. This film is definitely big on spectacle. It is the biggest budget Jordan Peele horror film, and there are moments where it's very clear where that budget came from, and it almost feels like a blockbuster at times with its thrills, but at the same time the film builds up to that. It's not just like constantly throwing these big sequences at you throughout. It's more of building up to those moments, but when they arrive, they are really cool. And then finally, for the atmosphere, I have it as moderate, because on one hand, when the dangers are arriving, there is a handful of times where things do get very kind of spooky and eerie, and you're like listening very intently and you're like, ooh, okay, all right, and there's like a genuine mystery and like, you know, awe, like, whoa, and moments like that. But at the same time, there's still plenty of times where things are normal and there's not constant, intense danger or this feeling of like, oh god, is there gonna be a jump scare at any second? There's really none of that in this film. And also with the atmosphere, when it is going in the scary route, I wouldn't actually say it's all that scary. It's more of just intense, kind of keeping you on the edge of your seat. It's not like something that you're like afraid to look at, you know? So that is how I will leave all of these categories. And now moving on to my recommendations. Nope is not all that scary, I must say. Compared to Us and Get Out, I think this is Jordan Peele's least scary film yet. I think it's his most tame and most family-friendly movie. It's rated R, but I think it's only really rated R because of language. And even then, there's not like a ton of bad language or anything. So that always is kind of goofy to me that like, oh, you say the F word 3 times and nope, R rating. But this film doesn't really feel like a horror movie a lot of times. Like there is that like kind of creepy, like, ooh, I'm kind of like on edge, but there's not many times where I'm jumping in my seat or I'm like horrified at what I'm looking at or I feel like, oh god, this is so dark. Like none of those sort of moments are hitting me, and I think that's where this film definitely just isn't all that scary because it's more like a mystery thriller in a way. And also I think this film does continue the trend that Jordan Peele established in Us, where you kind of have to do your homework after watching the movie. This one to me was the most cryptic and most confusing one, where on the surface some of the plot seems very like straightforward, but at the same time there's all kinds of lingering questions you're left with and mysteries that you're like, okay, so all right, I think okay, there's more to this. And when you look up stuff about the film afterwards and you're like kind of hearing about the theories and everything, all of that kind of comes more into the picture. You're like, oh, okay. But I do think that the film is very subtle with some of the big grand concepts that it's going for. So I think a lot of regular movie-going audiences, and honestly, including myself, are gonna kind of be left with like, okay, huh. Okay, and that's gonna be the general feeling you'll get after the film. So with my recommendations, I do think anyone who's maybe afraid, oh, is this gonna be scary? You're fine, you can go see it, it's totally fine. If you're looking for something that's sort of just chill and sit back and enjoy, maybe not quite your thing. I think the plot is demanding more out of you and wants you to be very attentive and look more into details. And I think it's totally fine to miss out on these details. I think I need to see this film again to really understand the whole thing. But this is Jordan Peele's most grand film yet, his biggest scale, going for the biggest kinds of concepts, and he also continues his humor. There's plenty of times in the film where characters are saying things that I think normal horror movies wouldn't have this sort of fun, you know, normal sounding dialogue. I think because of Key and Peele and all that, Jordan Peele still has this comedy background where he can have characters that are believable and funny, but still like relatable, and they don't ruin the tone of the film. But definitely check it out yourself and comment below what you thought of the film. And that is how scary Nope is. You can also check out my videos on Us and Get Out, which I will include in the end card, and also you can check out the How Scary playlist where you can find those films there. Comment below other horror films you would like me to go over, especially any new releases that'll be coming out this year. And please like and share these videos to show your support for the channel, and thank you very much for watching. I will see you later.